As always, please feel free to contact us with your comments, suggestions, or any questions you may have. Our phone number here is area code 716-821-5555. As always, please stay with us. Our Reading the Buffalo News is going to be coming up in just a moment.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, June 29th. Your readers today are
Ted Pietracki.
And I'm Ed Howard, and we're going to start with the weather. And the song for the day today is the old Buster Poindexter song, Hot, Hot, Hot. It is going to be hot this week. The forecast is for mostly sunny and very warm today with a high of 86. A thunderstorm in a couple of spots late tonight with a low of 71. And then again, a thunderstorm in spots tomorrow afternoon with a high of 88. Wednesday will be mostly sunny with dangerous heat. And the weather forecast here says, seek time in the shade and stay hydrated. It's going to be a high of 88 degrees. Our normal high and low temperatures for this date are 79 and 61 degrees. The record high, set in 1944, was 95 degrees, and the record cold in 1962 was 49 degrees. We've been having a lot of rain so far this year, and our normal rainfall year to date should be about 18 2/3 inches. We are well over 26 inches. We're about 7.5 inches ahead as far as rainfall goes for this year. And our air quality index for today is going to be good.
Well, Ed, our first article is a follow-up to your weather report there. Across the front of the first page is the big headline. It says, you know how we've been complaining about cool temperatures? That's about to change. Just in time for the 4th of July weekend, temperatures in western New York are about to soar. The Niagara region will see highs in the upper 80s and even in the 90s in some places this week, according to the National Weather Service. Monday's forecast high for Buffalo is 86, and that jumps to 89 degrees on Tuesday and back to 86 on Wednesday. In other parts of the region this week, the mercury will spike even more. Lockport's forecast high is in the 90s from Tuesday all the way through the 4th of July on Saturday, including 95 degrees on Thursday. In Niagara Falls, the forecast calls for highs in the 90s from Tuesday through Friday. The southern tier isn't spared during this heat wave, with temperatures predicted to hit the 90s in Jamestown and Olean. The Weather Service says residents should not expect much relief from the heat and humidity at night. In Buffalo, the forecast low for Monday is 63, but for the rest of the week, the forecast for the low, it will be in the 70s. Now's a good time to make sure you have the means to stay cool during the upcoming week, the Weather Service said. Exceptionally hot weather can pose health risks. People should be mindful of the heat index, not just the temperature, to understand just how hot it will feel, said Dr. Samuel Cloud, the Chief Medical Officer at Erie County Medical Center. That is especially the case for those with chronic health conditions who might not have the same resilience against the heat. Staying hydrated is important too, Cloud said. I see older people often neglect drinking water during heat waves, he added. That can lead to people showing up at the hospital to be treated for dehydration. Cloud said it's also important for parents of young children to make sure their kids are drinking enough water. Dr. David Holmes, the Director of Global Health Medicine at the University of Buffalo, Jacobs School of Medicine and Bioscience, said if you're going to be outside in the heat, it's important to be hydrated before you even go out of the door. People often don't think to drink until they're really thirsty, and it's a good idea to drink even before you're thirsty, he said. On a very hot day, dehydration can set in within minutes for someone who is older and who has medical problems, he said. It can take longer to happen for a younger, healthier person. Heat cramps can lead to heat exhaustion, which can lead to heat stroke, which is a life-threatening emergency, Holmes said. So it's just a continuum, and it all starts with hydration. If someone is acting confused or feeling faint or weak, those are symptoms of heat exhaustion, he said. That is when it's time to get inside and cool down, both externally and by drinking cold fluids. If you're going out for a walk or a run, try to avoid peak temperature hours, Holmes said. Hopefully, the sports teams and all the summer activities going on will hopefully have coaches doing the same thing and not having them practice during midday. For people heading to the beach or the pool for relief, remember to use and reapply sunscreen to fend off sunburn, Cloud said. Holmes said if you're going outdoors for a while, take a sunshade with you. Bring along a cooler with some cool fluids. The water might not only help you to get through the heat, but it could provide assistance to someone else who's in distress. Air conditioners should get quite a workout this week, which could lead to higher utility bills. National Grid advises raising the temperature on your thermostat, since the lower you set your air conditioning temperature, the more expensive it is to operate. For instance, a 75-degree setting costs about 18% more than a 78-degree setting. Some other advice from the utility. Running oscillating or box fans near the air conditioning unit creates airflow that circulates cold air throughout the room. Closing window coverings can help by reducing the sun's heating of a residence and preventing the air conditioner from running more than is necessary. Think about how much you use your oven on these days, since conventional and convection ovens add to the heat inside. The higher temperatures are hitting up some big outdoor activities that are coming up. The USA will be playing in a World Cup soccer match on Wednesday, but the game doesn't start until 8 p.m., so any outdoor watch parties won't be happening during the peak sunlight hours. And the village of Lancaster will host its Independence Day Carnival Thursday through Saturday. And the world's largest rubber duck is returning to Canal Side on land this time from Friday through Sunday. This is also the week for the YMCA Buffalo Niagara to welcome thousands of children to their summer camps. The Weather Service projects are above normal to continue through the following week also.
While staying on the front page of today's Buffalo News, our next headline is Establishment Democrats lost big in primaries. What will that mean for Jeremy Zellner? When Jeremy Zellner took the stage to concede that he had lost his bid to keep his Senate seat on Tuesday, he brought to an end to a contentious primary battle that he had every reason to believe he could win. His failure to do that leads some to wonder whether Zellner's status as party chairman is in jeopardy. He's been around for a while in politics, and you're going to pick up supporters over time, and you're also going to pick up opponents, said Sean Donahue, political science professor at the University of Buffalo. Zellner, the Erie County Democratic chair for the past 14 years, gained the nomination of the party he controls to replace Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan in the Senate after Ryan took office in January. Zellner then handily defeated Republican Dan Gagliardo in the February special election to fill Ryan's 61st district seat. He'd been hoping to stay in Albany going forward. With the support of many high-ranking elected officials and the fundraising apparatus that he helped build behind him, Zellner looked ready to achieve that goal. Assemblyman John Rivera, a prominent Democrat from the party's progressive wing, had other plans. Rivera defeated Zellner by nearly 10 percentage points. On election night and in the days since, also stinging from the defeat of the party's endorsed candidate to replace Rivera in the Assembly, Karen Hoke, Zellner has struck a conciliatory tone as he prepares to lead the party going into the fall elections. The time for fighting one another is over, and now it's time to put our gloves on and get the job done starting tomorrow, Zellner said as part of his concession speech, adding that the focus must now shift to defeating Republicans and fighting back against President Trump's agenda. But he will have to pick up the pieces from an election cycle that has created new rifts in his party and deepened existing ones, a task he says he is prepared for. Zellner said he plans to run to keep his seat as chair this fall, and part of that requires putting the primary in the rearview mirror. He has called both Rivera and attorney Adam Bojack, who defeated Hoke, and a third candidate, Kevin Deese, in the Assembly primary, to discuss moving forward. The party is going to work with Bojack on campaign strategy and fundraising in his race against Hamburg Republican Town Board member Frank Bogulski in the fall. Rivera is unopposed. There's plenty of reason to believe Zellner still has a strong path to victory in September when the party holds its reorganization meeting. But with hundreds of committee members, some dissent and challenges are inevitable. I'm focused on November and electing Democrats, Zellner said. That's what I always do, and I think that's why I have the support that I do from this organization. Despite Zellner's plans to remain chairman, the past few days have resulted in some loud and unhappy chatter about his continuing role as the head of the party. The desire for change and ill will following the primary effort to unseat many Democratic committee members in Buffalo who support Rivera have only raised the temperature. The intra-party primary rush to try to unseat city committee members loyal to Rivera largely failed. Nearly 80% of committee members in Rivera's voting districts retained their seats, and those committee members carry weighted votes that are significant. Behind the scenes, other committee members have begun raising the volume about the need for party reform and change, all of which leads back to Zellner. There's always a lot of talk about the party being a big tent, Rivera told the Buffalo News the day after his decisive primary win. But you know, if you ask people that have interacted with it, they would say it's not really a big tent. It's sort of a lot of familiar faces. It's a lot of consolidated power. Zellner has faced criticism for holding the Erie County Board of Elections commissioner position, a job he gave up to run for state senate, while also chairing the county party. The Board of Elections, the County Water Authority, the county party, Jeremy Zellner had his hands in a lot of things, Rivera said, and over time, that breeds resentment. Still, any effort to remove Zellner would require a strong, sustained, and coordinated effort. If there are people that want to challenge leadership or whatever they want to do, they're welcome to do that, Zellner said. We have a process, we have an election coming up in the fall, and we have committees in every town. While it's hard to point to any one factor that led to the poor showing for establishment county Democrats in the primaries, a consistent theme that has come up in the explanations from both foes and allies of Jeremy Zellner is his position as party chair itself. Leading a party can come with great influence and allows the chair to build strong relationships with the most powerful elected officials in their counties and beyond. Indeed, Zellner has built a powerful network of allies, many of whom he helped to get elected, and has proven himself a prolific fundraiser. Both Governor Kathy Hochul and Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz supported his campaign. But party leadership creates enemies along the way, having to choose between candidates to push within your own party and exerting your own power and influence in ways, fair or not, that some will view as foolish or unfair.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes after the hour. And we move on now to the opinion section, and we've been talking a lot about this hot weather, and now our first editorial is going to go to the opposite extreme about the Winter Olympic Games. And it's entitled An Exciting Prospect. Governor Kathy Hochul's effort to bring the Winter Olympics to New York City and Lake Placid deserves bipartisan support, along with a commitment to strengthen the organization in charge of New York's winter sports facilities. As reported by media outlets throughout the state, Hochul is bullish on the feasibility of New York City and Lake Placid co-hosting the 2042 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games. An exploratory committee over the next year will examine the feasibility of that concept. The governor rightly posits that holding the games at two separate venues can be manageable, as demonstrated by this year's event in Italy, which were held between Milan and Cortina, which is about 260 miles distance between each other. The panel, as reported by the News Albany Bureau Chief Robert Gavin, will explore whether New York could follow suit with games held between New York City and Lake Placid, roughly 290 miles apart. The governor also pointed out that the state has made generational investments in winter sport infrastructure in recent years, which includes modernized facilities in Lake Placid. Lake Placid, an Adirondack town of approximately 2,300 residents, has already hosted two memorable Olympics in 1932 and 1980. The 1980 Games are known for the Miracle on Ice, when the U.S. hockey team celebrated a 4-3 victory over the Soviet Union before defeating Finland for the gold medal. Those successful games helped establish Lake Placid as one of the most recognizable Winter Olympic venues in the United States. Supporters argue that Lake Placid could host alpine events, while existing New York City arenas could stage the indoor competitions. The case for New York is further supported by the fact that New York and New Jersey are co-hosting FIFA World Cup matches right now. The bipartisan support the idea has garnered is persuasive, with the return of games championed by Assemblymember Robert Carroll and State Minority Leader Robert Ort and others. Senator George Borrello echoed Ort's support, stating that New York's terrain, infrastructure, climate, and history make it uniquely positioned to host the games. He added that it would provide a huge boost to the economy of upstate. However, as noted in recent commentary from the Albany Times-Union editorial board, the Olympic Regional Development Authority, which is charged with operating New York's winter sports facilities, including Gore Mountain in North Creek and Bel Air Mountain in the Catskills, has demonstrated some cause for concern. The authority posted a record $52.5 million operating loss in the most recent fiscal year, despite record revenue. The Times-Union also pointed to recent environmental and management controversies surrounding ORDA as additional reasons for careful scrutiny. The Times-Union board is justified in suggesting that New York's approach to a bid should be cautious and sound, and it should include an honest appraisal of whether ORDA, created to oversee venues built for the 1980 Winter Olympics, is up to the task. It's fair to examine whether any organization that would be directly overseeing any facet of these events is fully prepared, as New York takes an exciting prospect of hosting the Winter Olympics into very serious consideration. Hochul's exploratory committee should scrutinize both the Olympic proposal and ORDA's readiness thoroughly so that any future bid rests on a very solid foundation.
Well, next we have the Another Voice column, and today the subject is health, and the author is Nathan McAndrew, who is a 28-year-old Buffalo resident who works in sales and is pursuing his funeral director's license. And he writes, his headline is, Proposed Ban Punishes Those with Chronic Pain. For decades, so-called broken windows policing promised that the government could solve public problems by cracking down on signs of disorder. The thinking was that aggressive enforcement against minor offenses could prevent more serious crime. But minor offenses are often symptoms of deeper problems: mental illness, addiction, homelessness, or poverty. Until those problems are addressed, they will keep manifesting in new ways. The same principle is sometimes used in drug policy. Rather than focus on why people use substances and fix those underlying issues, legislators are sometimes content to ban them altogether. New York risks repeating that mistake with bills that are now before Governor Kathy Hochul. They would prohibit the sale of kratom-derived products containing 7-OH above a very low threshold, even though many chronic pain patients depend on it. Banning 7-OH without addressing the reasons people use it would make life harder for chronic pain patients. Hochul should veto it. Chronic pain is a daily reality for millions. Nationally, nearly 1 in 4 adults lives with chronic pain. Some New Yorkers turn to 7-OH after surgeries, injuries, withdrawal, or failed treatments because the healthcare system has not met their needs. I am one of them. In 2016, as a freshman in college, I developed a pilonial cyst that was debilitating and extremely painful. After years of surgeries, I became physically dependent on prescription painkillers. I was trapped between pain and withdrawal in a healthcare system that had no good answer for either. A few months ago, I discovered 7-OH. Since then, my pain has been more manageable, and I no longer spend every day afraid of either pain or withdrawal. There are real concerns about products like these, including how they're advertised and how they're labeled. But the Senate and Assembly bills do not address any of that. It simply pushes the products and the people who use them out of view. We do not need a bill that makes legislators feel good while failing to help anyone. Hochul should commit to fixing the chronic pain crisis in our state instead.
Today's editorial cartoon comes to us from Mike Lukovich of the Creators Syndicate. And there's no dialogue or anything, it just has two figures. On the left side of the frame is the Grim Reaper, dressed in a black robe. On the right side of the frame, in a doorway, is Elon Musk, also in black, but a black suit with a white shirt and a black tie. And first of all, the Grim Reaper has his skeletal hand raised in the sky in a Nazi salute. And on the other side, Elon Musk is reaching up towards that with a Nazi-type salute also. And the Grim Reaper has in his hand a little message, a piece of paper that says, Musk, U.S. aid cuts to kill millions. And I would think this is a reference to the historical precedent of what had happened with the Holocaust and the death of millions of people.
We report, you decide. All right, turning now to the political columns. Our next one comes from Nolan Finley, who writes for the Tribute Content Agency, and the headline on his column is, "The First Amendment Isn't a Shield for Violence." Abdul El-Sayed has a curious interpretation of both free speech and how justice should be applied. The Democratic candidate for Michigan's open Senate seat is selling the idea that the First Amendment covers violence and vandalism if done in the name of a political cause. I'm a free speech absolutist. I don't think hate speech should be recognized as its own category of expression. Americans should be free to say the most awful things without legal consequence. Also, I agree that some actions are legitimate speech, particularly when associated with political protest, and should therefore be protected unless they interfere with the rights of others. But El-Sayed, in defending the University of Michigan pro-Palestinian activists named in federal indictment for crimes committed to protest for Israel's support in Gaza, is arguing the defendants are being prosecuted for their views rather than their acts. Spray painting messages across a private home, as the protesters did to houses of University of Michigan officials, is not free speech, it is vandalism. Tossing chemical-filled containers through those homes is not protected expression, it is a violent assault that could have resulted in injury or death. Stalking and intimidating public officials for their decisions is not political engagement, it's terrorism. The defendants, including a former staffer of El-Sayed's political campaigns, are being targeted for what they did, not for what they believe. To excuse their actions as an exercise of free speech is to deny the rights of the victims of their attacks. The Senate candidate further argues that the government followed a double standard in charging the UN protesters because President Trump issued full pardons to roughly 1,200 rioters who stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021. He's not wrong about the hypocrisy, but if Trump is allowed to become the gold standard of justice, we might as well close the courts. Not charging violent vandals because Trump let some of their kindred spirits off the hook is an invitation to anarchy. It's like saying no American should ever again be charged with homicide because O.J. got away with murder. Mobs seeking to influence policy through violence and destruction cannot become the political norm. What the University of Michigan gang did is indefensible. El-Sayed, who is seeking a seat in America's highest government chamber, pays lip service to condemning violence and then offers caveats that serve to excuse it. This is part of a pattern with El-Sayed. His claims not to be anti-Semite but associates publicly with Jew haters such as Hassan Piker, who has trafficked in anti-Semitic tropes. El-Sayed says he is an anti-Zionist, not anti-Semitic, but when the words inspire hateful acts of the sort aimed at the University of Michigan officials, it's a distinction without a difference. There's no room for equivocation on maintaining a civil and safe space for all Americans to express their views. That's what the First Amendment is designed to guarantee. It shouldn't be perverted to cover for mayhem.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and the time is 28 minutes after the hour. And our next opinion piece comes to us from Jonah Goldberg, and the headline is, Trump's second term is muddled, expensive, and an embarrassment. Every time I get asked by a TV anchor what I think about the drama of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, my favorite, quote, historical, unquote, headline from The Onion comes to mind. World's largest metaphor hits iceberg. And every time I do, I hear from defenders of the Trump administration complaining about the disproportionate media coverage of what should be a minor story in the grand sweep of things. They have a point. President Trump has done some good work rehabbing Washington, D.C., where I live, but the reflecting pool has bedeviled him. Algae keep returning to the pool, despite the administration's best efforts, and attempts to remedy the problem have yielded further problems. I can think of scores of stories that deserve more attention on the merits. But this complaint has two problems. First, it was Trump who invited extensive scrutiny of the effort. I'm very proud of it, he said before the Algae counteroffensive. I'm very good at building things and constructing things, so I hope you go and take a good look at it. Second, the reflecting pool is a microcosm of nearly everything that vexes people about the second Trump term. We can start with his decision to ignore the usual rules and procedures to give a no-bid job to a contractor for the repair and paint work. Trump said it would cost $1.8 million. The costs have grown nearly tenfold. To deal with the insurrectionist Al-J, he gave another no-bid job to a Mar-a-Lago crony, campaign donor, and convicted felon who looks like a villain from the old Dick Tracy comic strip. The man who vowed to drain the swamp of Washington's corrupt cronyism used figurative swampy means to deliver literal swampy ends. Without evidence, Trump claimed the only reason the reflecting pool's paint is peeling and algae blooming is because anti-American vandals sabotaged it with a 300-foot long gash. How vandals evaded park police, security cameras, and his own National Guard deployment remains unknown yet. Never mind how you put a 300-foot gash in a paint job Trump described as so very strong you couldn't if you had a knife. I don't want to give anybody ideas, but if you had a knife, you couldn't even cut it. It's so strong, so powerful. But the metaphorical meaning of the miasma on the mall hardly ends there. During a May 27th cabinet meeting, Trump boasted at length about the reflecting pool job and then handed the meeting off to his Secretary of Defense. I think actually your efforts on the reflecting pool are actually a great segue, said Pete Hegseth. If you look at Washington and Lincoln, these are two men that faced monumental tasks and stood up in historic fashion and delivered for the American people, Hegseth gushed. And when you step back and look at 47 years of what Iran waged, there's only one man over the course of both presidencies who has stood up and said they will never get a nuclear weapon. As with so much Hegseth said, this was not exactly true. Every president since Bill Clinton has said that a nuclear Iran was unacceptable. It's true that Trump's is the only president to use massive military force in the name of preventing it. Whether his efforts have made the never claim a reality is, at best, an open question. What isn't an open question? Trump's unilateral Iranian adventure did not go as planned. What began as another example of Trump trying to will into existence the reality that he wanted to segue into a murky, embarrassing, and costly spectacle with no satisfying end in sight. Talk about metaphors. That's because, as the saying goes, the enemy gets a vote. Trump can bypass or ignore many laws, but not the law of unintended consequences. The defining feature of Trump's presidency is his unvanquishable belief that laws, rules, and norms are impediments to his will and genius. He expects, nay demands, Hegseth-like sympathy and praise, recognizing that alleged genius. And when events conspire against Trump, the fault must lie in vandals and lies from fake news. The international order, like the domestic order, is not natural. They are more like man-made garden constructed out of the wilderness of the human condition. When the garden is not maintained, when the rules go ignored, the jungle grows back, just like algae.
Well, turning now to international news, our headline is U.S. and Iran to halt attacks and renew talks. Iran and the United States agreed to halt recent hostilities in the Gulf and renew talks regarding their dispute over the Strait of Hormuz, Axios reported on Sunday, a move that could end the tit-for-tat strikes that had threatened to unravel the interim peace agreement. The two sides plan to meet Tuesday in Qatar, Axios reported, citing a senior U.S. official. Reuters could not immediately confirm the report, and the White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. A return to diplomacy would follow several days of strikes and counterstrikes since an Iranian projectile hit a cargo vessel in the Strait of Hormuz on Thursday, with both the U.S. and Iran accusing the other of breaking an interim ceasefire that was agreed to on June 17th. Iran launched missiles and drones at U.S. military sites in Kuwait and Bahrain early on Sunday, shortly after President Trump threatened to wipe out the Iranian leadership if they did not stick to the agreement to end the war. The U.S. military said earlier it had struck Iran again hours after a tanker was hit in the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most important energy shipping route, which Tehran has largely closed for most of the conflict. There may come a point when we are no longer able to be reasonable and will be forced to militarily complete the job that we have very successfully started, Trump said on social media before the Axios report. If that happens, the Islamic Republic of Iran will no longer exist, he added. The 14-point interim peace accord was meant to halt the fighting which the U.S. and Israel started on February 28th and reopen the strait while talks proceeded on issues such as Iran's nuclear program. In a further sign of the frailty of the agreement, Iran canceled technical talks with the U.S. that had been scheduled for Sunday, citing recent attacks on the country and unfulfilled conditions of the Memorandum of Understanding, a member of the Office of Preservation and Publication of the Works of Iran's Supreme Leader told state television. For example, one of the reasons is checking that if we have access to unfrozen funds, if there is no access, then this condition has not been fulfilled, Mehdi Fazeli said. One round of mediated talks led by Vice President Vance and Iran's parliamentary speaker, Mohammad Bakr Olibov, was held in Switzerland a week ago, and Washington waived sanctions on Tehran, but fighting has since resumed and intensified. An hour after Trump's post, Kuwait's army said its air defenses were responding to missile and drone attacks, while Bahrain said sirens had sounded there. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said in a statement its Navy and Air Forces had launched missile and drone operations targeting U.S. military sites in Kuwait and Bahrain. The Guard said U.S. strikes had violated the ceasefire and, quote, will result in the complete halt of all diplomatic processes, state-run Press TV said. The IRGC Navy Command said American bases in the region, quote, will experience hell in coming days. A U.S. official confirming Iran had targeted U.S. facilities told Reuters there were no reported U.S. casualties or major damage to U.S. sites in the Middle East, but the situation was still unfolding. Hours later, alarm sounded for the second time in Bahrain, where authorities said an Iranian attack damaged a residential building in Bukhara province, where no casualties were reported. Bahrain urged the UN Security Council to hold an urgent session to hold Iran accountable. The Kuwaiti army said it had intercepted 2 ballistic missiles with no damage or casualties. Separately, Qatar said one of its nationals had died after sustaining injuries from shrapnel aboard a vessel that had gone missing on Saturday. A second person was injured in the incident, which was due to, quote, military operations in the area, the Interior Ministry said, without giving a location or apportioning blame.
And in Washington news from the front page, the headline is, Vance's presidential bid starts with MAGA voters and Trump. J.D. Vance was the first person Vicky Schwartz cast a ballot for in Ohio. She had just moved to the state from California, where she taught public school. He was trying his hand at politics by running for the U.S. Senate after working for a San Francisco-based investment firm. The 70-year-old suburban Columbus resident said she read Vance's best-selling memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, and she's 2 chapters into his new one. She gushed about his appearance this month on The View. Still, she's conflicted about who she'd vote for in the 2028 election if Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio both seek the Republican nomination to succeed President Trump. I kind of feel they should flip a coin, and then whoever wins the coin flip, that one runs for president or gets first choice, Schwartz said as she attended Trump's rally Thursday on the National Mall. Would an endorsement from the president help her make her decision? Absolutely, she says. Yet, as GOP voters look to Trump for guidance, he remains non-committal, and Vance is coming under increasing pressure to cement his spot as the GOP candidate to beat by early next year. In conversations with nearly a dozen sources close to the White House, most of whom requested anonymity to discuss private interactions, allies of the president and vice president said Trump isn't sold on Vance as his 2028 pick. The president has been asking those around him what they think of Vance and Rubio, a more seasoned politician who has become one of Trump's most trusted advisor on international affairs. It's the ultimate game of The Apprentice, and Trump feels he still has plenty of time to decide, one person close to the White House commented. Vance has not said publicly whether he intends to run for higher office, but he's been seizing the spotlight as he lays the foundation for a potential bid through the promotion of his new book called Communion and interviews tied to the Iran peace negotiations. He insists he's focused on helping Republicans win the November midterms and excelling at the vice presidency. I don't think that you should be thinking so much about a job you could have years down the road when you're still a year and a half into the job the American people elected you to do, Vance said in June. Vance's early performance as vice president appears to be helping his prospects. Nassim Nabli, a 43-year-old business owner from Landover, Maryland, said he is not as hard-hitting as Trump, but he's a little bit more articulate. Vance is well-versed on policy and exudes confidence, she said. Like many Republicans who spoke to USA Today at the Trump rally, Nabli said she was familiar with Hillbilly Elegy, and she had seen him defending the administration's policies on television. But they didn't know much more about the Ohio native who converted to Trumpism and Catholicism not long before he ran for office. Hogan Hattel, a recent high school graduate from Stanton, Virginia, identified Vance as a former Marine. The 18-year-old said he's inclined to support Vance and would like to learn more. Enter the book Communion, which continues the tradition of possible presidential candidates authoring books that would help define themselves to the voters. In one passage, Vance says he backs state-level bans on businesses being open on holidays like Thanksgiving so that workers can be with their families. The policy proposal puts rare daylight between Vance and Trump, who's pushed for fewer non-working federal holidays and could help Vance appeal to independent voters. Vance said he supports the right of workers to privately unionize and bargain for higher wages, another position Trump has not embraced. He described himself as both an economic populist and a religious conservative, and said it's consistent with his Christian Catholic faith that there be a distribution of resources that's consistent with the common good.
Well, here's something a little different. The headline is, As Insects Die, Birds Shrink at Lake Erie Observatory. Tree swallows at a Great Lakes Bird Observatory are shrinking, a troubling finding that the University of Michigan researchers said is tied to a crashing insect population in the region and the world. Tree swallows are small songbirds that primarily eat insects, and as the amount and diversity of insects declined at the Long Point Bird Observatory in Norfolk, Ontario, so did the size of the observatory's tree swallows as well as the number of eggs they lay, researchers found in a study published this week. Without as many insects to eat, the birds are experiencing something closer to malnutrition, said Charlotte Probst, a doctoral candidate in the University of Michigan School for Environment and Sustainability, who led the research. We're seeing in real time how low insect abundance is negatively impacting the health and chance of survival of these birds, said Matt First, a Birds Canada research ecologist and manager of the observatory located some 106 miles southwest of Buffalo. Ecologists at the observatory on Lake Erie's North Shore have been monitoring the tree swallows since 1960. They track things like the bird's reproduction success, nesting habits, and food supply. The study unravels whether the shrinking is driven by climate change or biodiversity decline. The researchers found that the bird's size and their reproductive rates were more impacted by insect availability than by temperature. The findings should raise alarm bells about the cascading effects of losing insects, Probst said. As insects are killed by habitat loss and pesticides, less food is available at the base of the food web, and that puts animals like birds at risk.
In world news, quakes straining Venezuela's fragile health system. Earthquake victims are overwhelming healthcare centers in Venezuela's coastal state of La Guaira and beyond, pushing an already fragile health system way past its limits. Two powerful 7.2 and 7.5 earthquakes struck within a minute of each other on Wednesday, toppling buildings and severely damaging the country's main international airport. By Saturday afternoon, authorities report that nearly 3,240 injured people and a death toll approaching 1,430. Hundreds of aftershocks have occurred by Saturday, the head of the assembly said in a report. The first wave of patients was mainly survivors suffering crush injuries and multiple fractures after being pulled from collapsed buildings. But physicians warn the crisis is entering a more dangerous phase as people trapped for days beneath the rubble begin arriving with kidney failure, crush syndrome, and limbs that can no longer be saved. Skin infections, gastrointestinal illness, and psychological trauma are expected to follow in the coming weeks. Authorities have restricted access to La Guaira to allow rescue operations to continue uninterrupted while reducing public health risks, Acting President Delcy Rodriguez said on Saturday. According to her, the restrictions would enable health authorities to implement sanitary measures, including the management of victims' remains. The earthquakes are already testing a healthcare system weakened by years of economic collapse, shortage, and an exodus of medical workers. This new national tragedy strikes while Venezuela remains in a prolonged humanitarian emergency, said Juan de Urbana, a pediatric intensive care physician and a member of Venezuela's National Academy of Medicine. We already lack the capacity to care for patients on an ordinary everyday level. According to Urbina, public hospitals entered the disaster with shortages of emergency supplies and surgical material, about half the hospital beds they once had, and radiology equipment that is largely obsolete or no longer operational. Around 30% of the country's physicians and 70% of its nurses have left Venezuela over the past decade, he said, citing figures from the Venezuelan Medical Federation. At one outpatient clinic in La Guardia on Thursday, electricity was available only through a backup generator powering the vaccine refrigerator. Patients were lying on mattresses, benches, and parking lot pavement because treatment rooms were full, while doctors improvised additional care areas outside of the building.
Well, this is the time we normally turn to death listings from the Buffalo News, but there are no death listings today, so we're going to move on to Georgia Nichols' Royal Stars. And if today is your birthday, happy birthday. You are introspective and practical. You have a quirky sense of humor and are both outgoing and private. This is a year of wrapping up and moving on. Let go of what is no longer relevant. Do some internal and external housekeeping. Clear the decks for a new cycle. Now, the stars show what kind of a day we're going to have. There are no 5-star days. There are no 4-star days. There are a few 3-star days, but most of us are going to have 2-star so-so days. For Aries, it's a 2-star day. Today's full moon is challenging because it puts the demands of home and family and your private life against the demands of your job, your career, and your public world. Tonight, you're noticed. For us Taurians, we're going to have a 2-star day. Pay attention to everything you say and do today because this is a slightly accident-prone day for us. Tonight, we should discover something new. For Gemini, well, 3 stars. Fiery Mars in your sign gives you a strong, purposeful energy today, which is why you might be concerned about financial matters. So tonight, check your finances. For Cancer, 2 stars. The moon is your ruler, which is why you often feel the energy of the full moon. Today, this particular full moon is directly opposite your sign. Tonight, listen and cooperate. For Leo, 2 stars. This is a poor day to get involved in controversial discussions about politics, religion, racial issues, or even plans about travel, legal or medical matters, or higher education. Tonight, get better organized. I don't know, that one sounds like you shouldn't talk to anybody during the day today. For Virgo, 2 stars. Tension with friends or members of groups might arise today because of full moon energy, but in spite of that, tonight, you should enjoy socializing. For Libra, 2 stars. There might be a tug-of-war between the demands of home and family versus the demands of your career or your public life and reputation. So tonight, relax at home. For Scorpio, 2 stars. Pay attention to everything you say and do today because this particular full moon can create an accident-prone influence for you, but tonight, you will have an interesting discussion. For Sagittarius, 3 stars. Double-check financial matters that might create problems today because of the full moon. Tonight, take care of your possessions. Capricorn, 2 stars. Today, only the full moon in your sign all year is taking place, which is why you might feel tension with others. You might be too emotional, but tonight, you win. For Aquarius, 3 stars. Be easygoing with co-workers because today's full moon can create problems at work and with your health or with a pet. Tonight, enjoy privacy. And finally, for Pisces, it's a 2-star day. Parents should be extra vigilant about their children today, especially toddlers. And tonight, the word is be friendly.
Well, after listening to that, this is a big week, America 250 Stars and Stripes, and it certainly wasn't a Stars Day today for anybody.
No, it wasn't.
Must be a Stripes Day.
There you go.
Well, looking back in history now to what happened throughout the years on June 29th in 1776. Citing the detestable and insupportable tyranny of British rule under King George III, the Virginia Convention adopted the first Constitution of the Independent Commonwealth of Virginia. In 1889, Chicago became the largest U.S. city in area and second largest by population after voters approved annexation measures. In 1927, Aboard the Bird of Paradise, U.S. Army Air Corps Lieutenant Albert Hagenberger and Lieutenant Lester Maitland completed the first successful trans-Pacific flight, landing at the Corps' Wheeler Field in Hawaii after flying non-stop across the Pacific Ocean from Oakland, California. In 1956, the U.S. interstate system was created when President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed into law the National Interstate and Defense Highways Act, which allowed for highway user tax hikes to fund expansion and improvements. In 1984, Bruce Springsteen started his Born in the USA World Tour with a concert in St. Paul, Minnesota. And in 1995, the Space Shuttle Atlantis docked for the first time with Russia's Mir space station. 2007, Apple Incorporated began selling its first generation iPhone. And finally, in 2017, President Donald Trump's revised travel ban began taking partial effect, restricting entry by certain nationals of majority Muslim nations of Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen.
Well, in a note from our political notebook from the District of Columbia, the housing bill is headed to the president after a delay. House Speaker Mike Johnson said on Sunday that he would send a bipartisan housing affordability bill to Donald Trump on Monday, days after the Republican president refused to sign the bill until a divisive voting right measure was passed. It will become law, Johnson said on Fox News' Sunday Morning Futures program. Trump on Wednesday abruptly canceled the signing ceremony for the housing legislation in an effort to pressure Republicans into passing a controversial voter ID bill known as the Save America Act.
You are listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for June 29th on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and we'll return for some more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. And your readers today are
Ed Howard.
and Ted Pajak. And now we turn to city and regional news. And our first article is headlined, Buffalo hoped to get up to $60 million for its parking ramps. It's going to get more. As part of the effort to dig out from under the huge budget shortfall, Buffalo officials decided it would make sense to sell the parking ramps and use the money toward paying down the deficit. Then Mayor Christopher Scanlon, who initiated the idea, hoped to get $40 to $60 million in total. But when the deal closes, the number will be even higher than Scanlon's highest estimate. The Buffalo Parking Authority has granted final approvals for the purchase of 4 city parking ramps at the price of $61.6 million. The sale is set to close today, just before the fiscal year ends tomorrow. The sale will go a long way toward getting the $70 million that the city needs to collect by the end of the year to be back in the black. So, very successful there, as well as helping to control debt service for our purposes, Deputy Mayor Benjamin Swadenkamp said this week during a meeting of the Buffalo Parking Authority, the newly formed group to take possession of the ramps and secure bonds to pay the city for them. Swadenkamp said the Buffalo Civic Auto Ramps, the entity commonly referred to as BCAR, that currently runs the daily operations of the ramps, will transfer its $2.3 million in the end-of-the-year profits to the new authority to allow for financial breathing room during the transition and for ongoing construction projects at the ramps. Instead, that's going to get conveyed to the authority again, so that BCAR and the authority have operating cash for any contingency that could pop up, he said. BCAR will continue to run daily operations for the new authority, which will begin operating the ramps on Wednesday. Scanlon, who returned to his South District Common Council seat at the beginning of the year, initiated the parking ramp plan while serving as acting mayor last year to bring in additional revenue to lessen the burden of the tax levy increase in the current budget. The Scanlon administration included $26.5 million in the current budget year from the ramp sales, allowing him and the Common Council to lessen the tax levy increase, which eventually landed at 8% after negotiations with the council. In order to include the money, the administration had to win the approval of the state legislature, which passed a law last year allowing for the creation of the Buffalo Parking Authority, which will own and manage the ramps, though the city still holds the title to the property. Mayor Sean Ryan characterized the plan as a one-time revenue gimmick while campaigning against Scanlon in the Democratic primary, which he won before being elected to the office in November. But after coming into office, his administration explored the idea of scrapping the plan altogether, saying the city would be better off engaging in short-term borrowing for the money budgeted for the current fiscal year and continuing to pull in all revenues from the ramps over operating costs, a figure that has been at about $4 million and expected to rise. Ryan administration officials had also said at one point that the city might not get the $40 million to $60 million figure that Scanlon administration officials claimed the ramps would bring in. The authority is paying the city for the ramps with money raised through bond sales. The original plan would have seen the remaining money, debt, service payments, and operating costs returned to the city each year. But Ryan administration officials and their partners on the deal discovered the Internal Revenue Service rule that requires the authority to keep any money that is not directly related to services provided to the city. The additional money through the ramp sales allowed Ryan administration to bump a budgeted line in next year's budget by $15 million during negotiations with the council and give the city additional money in future years.
Well, our next story is headlined Buffalo Cop Fired in 2023 Returns to Work After Termination Reduced to Suspension. A Buffalo police officer fired 3 years ago is back at work, but he will have limited interaction with the public until at least the end of the year. Officer Kevin J. Murphy lost his job because of a 2020 incident in which he used excessive force and wrote in a report that a person he arrested said something she didn't say. The arbitrator, who agreed with the department brass in October 2023 and decided Murphy should be terminated for his actions, which included pepper spraying a woman twice, concluded that Murphy's explanation for how he ended up falsely attributing the statement to the woman was, quote, contrived and entirely lacking in credibility. But less than a year after the firing, thanks to a lawsuit by the police union, a state judge vacated the arbitrator's ruling terminating Murphy. And Murphy has been working in the Buffalo Police Department's property office since late December. A new arbitration conducted in April, after the city did not appeal the court's decision nixing his termination, resulted in a less severe punishment for Murphy, a 30-day suspension. In his April 21st decision, hearing officer Timothy Taylor concluded that, quote, the charges are sustained and imposed 6 terms of discipline for Murphy, whom Taylor concluded violated departmental rules on March 25, 2020, when responding to the report of a person with a gun on Dartmouth Avenue. Body camera video footage in the case, which came to light in March 2024 in a report from Investigative Post, showed Murphy cursing at and twice pepper spraying a woman. Murphy arrived at the scene after other officers and seconds later began yelling at a woman who was on the porch and ordering her to come off the porch. He grabbed her by the wrist and led her to a police car, according to the footage. Murphy told her to put her hands behind her back and that she would be pepper sprayed if she didn't comply. After placing a handcuff on one of her wrists, Murphy pepper sprayed the woman twice while trying to cuff her other wrist. In his reports about the incident, Murphy claimed the woman admitted to falsely reporting there was a person with a gun in order to get police to more quickly respond. In the woman's arrest report, Murphy wrote, "Defendant replied, I called and said there was a gun to get you here faster." Someone who called 911 said a person was there with a gun, and Murphy assumed the person who called 911 was the woman he ordered off the porch. But before the time Murphy pepper sprayed her, Murphy knew she wasn't armed, and the 911 call about a gun, quote, was not accurate, unquote, the first arbitrator concluded. Murphy initially charged the woman with making a false report, resisting arrest, obstruction, and reckless endangerment, charges that were later dismissed. The woman filed a complaint with the Buffalo's Department of Internal Affairs Division, which led to departmental charges against Murphy in 2020. Murphy, 41, who was hired by the Buffalo Police Department in 2015, did not respond to a text message from a reporter. John Davidson, the head of Murphy's union, the Buffalo Police Benevolent Association, also did not respond to a request for comment. In addition to the 30-day unpaid suspension, Taylor ordered back pay and reinstatement of health insurance, seniority, and other benefit accruals for the period between October 11, 2023 and December 29, 2025. He ruled that Murphy was not entitled to, quote, any damages regarding overtime, unquote, and assigned him to the department's property office for a year. Murphy also lost his right to an assignment to work in the department's South District, where he had been working before he was fired. In an August 2024, after the Buffalo Police Benevolent Association brought a lawsuit that sought to overturn the original arbitration decision, State Supreme Court Justice Amy Martosh vacated the order for Murphy's termination, ruling that the arbitrator failed to show he considered evidence from 3 experts on the use of force in rendering the decision. Murphy was reinstated as a Buffalo police officer on December 29, 2025, by then-Commissioner Alfonso Wright.
Well, for those of you who like cowboy movies and Western novels, this story's for you. It's a wild, wild Western New York as cattle rustling may mark a trend. An employee of Lamb Farms, a large dairy farm in Oakfield, awoke at 3 a.m. on May 24th to find 17 5-month-old calves missing from the barn. These were young cows, but not little. Each weighed about 400 pounds and had been smuggled out of the barn through a back driveway only a half hour earlier. I think the primary feeling was violated, said Kendra Lamb, who runs the farm with her husband. You know, we live in the country. It's a very trusting environment. Our team is really invested in these animals, and we work really hard to take good care of them. And the idea that someone had come and taken some of our animals made us angry, frustrated, and a little bit scared for them. Honestly, we were pretty concerned about their well-being. Police later arrested 2 people in connection with the thefts, and the Lambs learned that their experience, while unusual in Western New York, fits a pattern that's becoming a trend. 17 calves were stolen from 2 farms in Jefferson County in January, and 64 calves were stolen from a farm in west central Ohio in May. None of those calves were ever found. It has to do with the beef price being inflated right now. So the value of beef is up, and this makes these animals much more valuable, Lamb said of the thefts. There are 2 lamb farm locations in Oakfield, and the one targeted by the thieves is used for raising calves. About 2,200 calves on the farm range in age from newborn to 8 months old. The other farm, which is the milking location, has cameras. The Lambs, who can trace their family's agricultural legacy back 15 generations, are still unsure why their farm was targeted. But it is one of the largest in the area, and the layout is easily identifiable on Google Maps. A husband and wife from Lockport, Torrance Schmidt, who's 25, and Carissa Schmidt, 26, have been arrested and charged with stealing 17 Holstein heifer calves from the Lambs farms, a value of which totals $45,900. The pair were located in Jamestown on June 3rd, according to the Genesee County Sheriff's Office, as it was helping with the help of knit-tight farming community that contributed to finding the defendants so quickly. To my knowledge, they acted alone, said Andrew Hale, the Genesee County Chief Deputy of Road Patrol. Hale said cattle theft does not pose an imminent threat for Western New York farms, though. Obviously, there's always a chance that it could happen, but we don't see this being a growing trend or anything else in our area, Hale said. I know there have been other instances across the country, but right now, it's not the threshold of being an epidemic or anything like that. On May 27th, 3 days after the police report was filed, all 17 calves were located in the Lebanon Valley Livestock Market in southeast Pennsylvania. The suspected thieves had taken the yellow identification tags off the 16 of the 17 calves. The radio frequency identification tags, which help track livestock and record information that identifies them, were taken off 12 of the 17 calves. Lamb suspects that these conditions caused the employees at the livestock market to be suspicious when the calves came in. Word spread quickly on social media about the theft. Lamb is grateful to the tight-knit farming community for not only helping to locate the animals, but for making sure they were healthy while they were cow-napped. Now, Ed, that's a moving story. I'm not giving you a bum steer on that matter.
I got nothing to say after that.
Over to you, Ed.
Well, what I will say then is you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes past the hour, and it's time to turn to sports. And the big story this week was the NHL draft here in Buffalo. But Mike Harrington says the draft was a snoozer, and we'll see if the picks make some noise. His column begins, yawn. That's an initial reaction to the fourth edition of the NHL draft in Buffalo. Not much intrigue, not much sizzle, unless you're a fan of Justin Bieber or Luke Bryan, and not much pace. Took far too long. The Sabres only made 5 picks, equaling 2020 when they picked Jack Quinn and J.J. Peterka, for the fewest in any year of their history since the 1970s. Let's go back to a centralized version of this thing with all the team execs hobnobbing on the draft floor and not sitting in sweats in their locker rooms back home. The first round went on for more than 4 hours, and rounds 2 through 7 stretched on for more than 5. That doesn't happen when everybody's together. They keep it moving. Peer pressure to make a pick from a nearby table can help move things along, and so can the need to make that late afternoon flight home. I'm torn on the celebrity factor. I'm a traditionalist, and I would prefer the GMs and scouting directors to get up on stage and make the pick. But I get that the live and TV audiences might be more interested to see Celine Dion, who announced Montreal's Ivan Demidov at the Sphere in Las Vegas in 2024, or the whole Bieber show that we saw here on Friday night. Biebs played it up to the audience, and using his use of Mr. McKenna to introduce the selection of Gavin McKenna at number 1 overall could go down as one of those unique moments in Toronto Maple Leafs history, especially if they ever eradicate 1967 from the unique numerology of hockey and finally win that first Stanley Cup in what's going to be 60 years and counting come next spring. A personal favorite was Bills lineman Dion Dawkins putting his arm around NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman like they were old buds, and then leading the crowd in the hey, 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 and Marv Levy salute. Although, to be frank, with this crummy format, there were probably a lot of places I would rather have been right there on Friday night. Still, you have to give it up to the Sabres for adding that 1 teaspoon of spice to the proceedings, and they struck an emotional chord of the weekend Saturday when honoring Bradley Burden, the Niagara University club hockey player killed in a car crash in February. With his team on the stage, Burden's sister Shannon announced the pick of Buffalo 4th rounder Oliver Murnieks. Speaking after the draft, Buffalo Assistant General Manager and Scouting Director Jerry Fortin gave it up to his staff for the way they followed and charted first-round Daxon Rudolph, the number 4 overall choice, whom the Sabres tabbed over all other defense prospects the prominent draftniks had going in that spot. The reality is that it seems you could throw a sheet over Rudolph and fellow top 10 defense prospects Chase Reed, Albert Smits, Carson Karels, and Keaton Verhoff. In a few years, we'll look back at this draft and see how it turned out. Maybe the Sabres went awry, and it will be like 2016 when Vancouver took the KeyBank stage and chose Finnish defenseman Olli Juolevi at number 5 as the top blue liner in the class. As it turned out, he only played 41 career NHL games, and the Canucks foolishly passed on fellow first-rounders like Mikhail Sergachev, Charlie McAvoy, and Jacob Krejci. Whoops. But the Sabres field scouts Graham Beamish and Lucas Sutter really did the job in getting to know what makes Rudolph tick on and off the ice. Rudolph's hockey sense and character were a sick combination in the Sabres' eyes. Beamish and Sutter, of the famous Alberta Sutter clan and the son of longtime NHLer Rich Sutter, watched practices and games in season and in summer events. They knew him inside and out as a player and as a person, Fortin said. Fair enough. The Sabres drafting in recent years has been solid. The draftniks don't like this pick much, but how much of that is because they didn't look smart after it was made? I look more to recent draft history. The Sabres have nearly traded 2025 Vadim Marka twice, and they might actually do it in to reel a big fish. Fortin said in 2024 that second-rounder Adam Kleber would have had an NHL contract waiting for him had he opted to sign this year rather than return to Minnesota Duluth for his junior year. Fortin and the amateur team were floored like everybody else in town that GM Jarmo Kekalainen started with the Sabres in the netherworlds of pick number 27 and ended at picks number 4 and 20. But as for using those picks in trades, Fortin said bluntly, I didn't hear anything that really helped our team in terms of making an impact and making our team better right now. Too bad. That big move was really what this draft needed.
Well, Ed, you and I were spared of that snoozer as we were having dinner together on Friday night as the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service gave us a wonderful volunteer appreciation dinner.
It was very good.
It was a very nice evening. Well, now we have Rachel Lindsay, and she's got to give us her perspective on the draft. And her headline is, 3 centers highlight the Sabres' 5 selections. The Buffalo Sabres had just 5 picks in this year's NHL draft, and they adhered to a philosophy as they shaped this year's selection class. You have to continue to feed the pipeline all the time, Assistant General Manager Jerry Fortin said. If you don't draft well, your organization is going to suffer pretty quickly, whether it's from an asset perspective or just continuing to fill the pipeline from underneath. Draft well, draft smart, Fortin said, and it's a mandate from the Sabres general manager Jarmo Kekalainen, who is less than 7 months into his current role, but has more than 27 years of experience in NHL front office scouting, player personnel, and management roles. The Sabres completed the second day of the draft on Saturday at the KeyBank Center, selecting 3 players, including a pair of Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League products. The Sabres selected Olivers Mernix, a center from St. John of the QMJHL, at number 124 in the 4th round. Doman Shungoth, a center from Hungary who played for the Kuku in Finland's top junior league, at number 156 in the 5th round, and Dylan Dumont, a right wing from Drummondville of the QMJHL, at number 188 in the 6th round. On Friday, they selected Daxton Rudolph, a defenseman from Prince Albert of the Western Hockey League, at number 4 overall, and Ilya Morozov, a former from Miami of Ohio, at number 20. The way the draft shook out surprised Fortin. He said the Sabres originally held the number 27 pick. Then they traded that pick and defenseman Michael Kesselring to San Jose on June 17th for the number 20 pick. 3 days before the start of the draft on Friday, the Sabres acquired the number 4 pick as part of a trade for defenseman Bowen Byram and left wing Jordan Greenway. I would have never predicted a month or 2 ago that we would have been picking at number 4 and number 20, Fortin said. 3 of the Sabres' 5 draft picks are centers: Morozov, Mernix, and Shaskoth. Fortin said drafting the position this year wasn't necessarily to fill a priority, but to create versatility. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play center when they get to the American Hockey League or the National Hockey League level, but as we've all said many times, it's a lot easier to shift from center to wing than to turn a winger into a center. And the style of play with the centers we took this year is more important to us and how they play the game. Mernix, like Morov, went from Europe to North America to play hockey. The 6-foot, 200-pound center from Riga, Latvia, played for St. John in 25-26, scoring 7 goals with 13 assists in 31 games with the Sea Dogs, despite missing part of the season because of a concussion. He describes himself as a two-way player who will put everything on the ice and help my team win. I bring a game that's very reliable, very defendable, and can score some goals or put points on the board. As I said, the coach can put me in any situation he wants me in. Murnix came to the United States to play at the advice of his agent and explained that it was a move that was better for his development and to get more exposure.
Well, in a roundup of activity from the FIFA World Cup, Jude Bellingham dragged England out of a rainy grind on Saturday in East Rutherford, New Jersey, scoring 1 goal and creating another for Harry Kane as Thomas Tuchel's side beat Panama 2-0 to top Group L and avoid a nervy rout through the World Cup knockout phase. England will play the Democratic Republic of Congo, which beat Uzbekistan 3-1 in the round of 32 after finishing first with 7 points. And Lionel Messi scored on a free kick as a second-half substitute, and Argentina delivered on a 3-1 World Cup victory over Jordan in the Group J finale for each side Saturday at Arlington, Texas. And in a duel of heavyweights, Colombia finished off a 0-0 World Cup draw against Portugal to earn the top spot in Group K on Saturday at Miami Gardens, with an offside call preventing a late potential winning goal for the South American side. And Yoann Wissa scored a brace in the second half as the Democratic Republic of the Congo rallied for a 3-1 victory over Uzbekistan on Saturday in Atlanta to deliver the Leopards into the knockout round for the first time in World Cup history. And Nikola Vlasic headed in Luka Modric's 83rd minute corner to lift Croatia to a 2-1 victory over Ghana on Saturday in Philadelphia and a second-place finish in World Cup Group L. And Australia and Algeria played out a thrilling 3-3 draw on Saturday in Kansas City, Missouri, a result that perfectly suited both sides, sending them into the World Cup's last 32 and ending Iran's hopes of reaching the knockout stage as one of the best third-place teams.
And in Major League Baseball news, Schwarber is the first to 30 home runs. Kyle Schwarber hit a go-ahead 2-run homer with 1 out in the 7th inning off Kodai Senga on yesterday afternoon as the visiting Philadelphia Phillies secured a 5-4 victory over the New York Mets. The Phillies lost a 3-run lead by giving up a run in the 5th and 3 in the 6th, but quickly regained the lead in the 7th against Senga, who threw 2 scoreless innings before facing Schwarber for the second time. Rookie Justin Crawford led off the 7th with a single to left field, and Schwarber came up after Tia Turner fouled out. Facing 4 straight forkballs, Schwarber hit a 1-2 fastball to center field, giving the Phillies a 5-4 lead. Schwarber reached 30 homers for the 6th straight season and the 8th time in his career. Schwarber's homer also helped the Phillies improve to 38-18 in their past 56 games and to move 10 games over 500. Besides going deep, Schwarber also singled and stole second during a 3-run 3rd inning that gave the Phillies that 3-zip lead against Tobias Myers. And Caminero goes deep for the 4th straight game. Junior Caminero hit a home run for the 4th straight game as his Tampa Bay Rays defeated the visiting Arizona Diamondbacks 5-1 yesterday afternoon in St. Petersburg, Florida. And Jack Flaherty didn't expect to stay on the injured list for very long. The Detroit Tiger right-hander correctly assessed the injury that forced him to miss a couple of starts. He returned to the mound on Sunday yesterday and dominated the series finale against the visiting Houston Astros, striking out 9 over 5 scoreless innings while allowing 2 hits and 3 walks. he took a no decision in the 7-5 loss. And finally, the stat of the day is 0.71. Giants ace Logan Webb allowed only one hit in 7 shutout innings against the Braves on Friday to lower his ERA in June to 0.71. Webb threw 92 pitches while striking out 6 and walking 2.
Well, you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 30 minutes past the hour, and it is time now to turn to Ask Eric and get life's problems solved. Dear Eric, I've been having problems with the noise coming from downstairs for more than 3 years now. I live in a 2-family rental. 2 much younger women live on the first floor. One of them is completely rude about how much noise she makes. However, I didn't have a conversation with her about the noise. It took me 3 years, but I finally wrote a letter because I rarely speak to them or they to me. It caused so much anxiety on my part to leave that letter for them. I was ashamed of myself for waiting so long and putting up with so much noise when I didn't need to. I was simply intimidated by rocking the boat by asking for a couple of things that would make the house more peaceful. Do you have any tips on how people can approach others in a general sense? Yes, you've given us some very specific questions you could ask the other person depending on what's going on in that situation, but generally, how can people prepare themselves for those conversations? They always seem to be much harder than they really turn out to be. Signed, Tough Talk. Dear Talk, rehearsing or role-playing the conversation with a friend can take some of the stress out of the actual conversation. You can run through the worst-case scenarios and potentially experience the relief of a reasonable exchange. Similarly, asking a friend to accompany you can give you the support you're looking for. It sounds like, although your neighbors have been unneighborly, the anxiety is a bigger hurdle. So, sometimes a conversation just isn't going to be your best option. In this specific case, you might instead ask your landlord to address it. If that conversation also seems too anxiety-provoking, focus on modes of communication that you do feel accessible to you. Dear Eric, my longtime boyfriend is a cordial, charming, and intelligent professional with lots of friends and co-workers in his life. However, there is a big problem. He is an over-talker and terrible listener. I find myself cringing when he goes on and on about a subject, talking over other people, going down rabbit holes, or never answering their questions. Every group conversation turns into a monologue, and even our personal conversations get boring because I don't need every detail. In business, he's mentioned that he has received some gentle feedback regarding this issue, but he hasn't taken heed. I've tried explaining that others have interesting things to say and want to contribute to a conversation, and he says he understands, but nothing changes. When I'm at my wit's end, I will politely interject to answer a question or cut to the chase, and am then able to state how he will then state how rude I am. His verbosity has become a point of contention. I'm hoping not to leave the relationship over this, but it's embarrassing and humiliating. Signed, Heard Enough. Dear Heard. For the time being, put aside trying to curb his over-talking with others and focus on the ways that you two communicate. Although they're all related, it's likely that your social embarrassment is exacerbating the frustration you feel with him in one-on-one conversations. It sounds like you don't share an understanding of how conversations go, so it might help to take a step back and acknowledge that he talked one way, and in parentheses, and presumably feels fine about it, and you hear him in another way, which you also feel fine about. You might then propose that you work together to find a different way of communicating. If he won't agree to that, however, it doesn't just suggest an issue with over-talking, it suggests that he's not willing to work on the relationship. Dear Eric, I'm finding that increasingly the customer service agents on the phone have a heavy accent. My hearing is not good, and even with hearing aids, I'm unable to fully comprehend what they're saying. How can I politely ask to speak with someone else without appearing biased or demeaning? I often leave these calls feeling frustrated and more confused than before. Using AI chatbots doesn't seem to work either. Signed, Confusing Call. Dear Call, it's okay to say, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding you. Is there another agent to whom I can speak? When you call customer service, you have a shared goal, problem solving. If you're not communicating well because you can't understand the agent, no one's goal is achieved. But often, customer service agents aren't allowed to switch you to someone else without you asking.
Well, this is a very historic week as we will be celebrating the USA's 250th birthday, and people are looking for different ways to celebrate and make it just a little bit more special. And this next article has some ideas, and it's just called So Forth. In addition to all the annual traditions like fireworks that come with the 4th of July, America will celebrate 250 years of independence this time around. Make your holiday party sparkle with classic red, white, and blue palette. Here are some decorating ideas. Patriotic paper plates, napkins, and table runners set a festive tone for all Independence Day celebrations. Dish towels, table runners, placemats in solid colors like blue or white can make a great host gift for a holiday party. You can really put something cute together, said Sigrid Doyle, the manager at Sideways, a home decor and gift shop in Plymouth, Michigan. Other accents in neutral hues like baskets, containers, and bowls can balance the colorful theme. At the Vines Flower and Garden Shop in Farmington, Michigan, owner Michelle Hines shares some colorful arrangements for the historic occasion. Red Gerber daisies are fun. There are minis and standards, she said. Mother Nature is so good to us with white this time of year. You can do lysanimus or snapdragons or white stock. Blue has some limitations, but you can get hydrangeas and delphiniums, adds Hines, who arranges these blooms in colorful vessels for a festive feel, but clear containers work also. Hammered ball jars are great for outdoor use at picnic table and on deck, she says. You can add little flags to your arrangements and some red, white, and blue ribbon. For casual gatherings, a red, white, and blue centerpiece can embellish a buffet on a kitchen island. We encourage customers to bring in their own containers for arrangements or reuse them, like bottle sets they can fill with loose flowers, Hines says. It's a great way to recycle. Traditional looks with a twist can take your holiday decorations to another level. 4th of July entertaining is all about creating a space that feels festive, nostalgic, and welcoming, says Rebecca Talley, Senior External Communications Specialist at Michaels. We're seeing customers gravitate towards classic Americana details with an elevated twist. Think stars and stripe accents, gingham patterns, layered table runners, colorful melamine dinnerware, mini flags, and fresh florals in red, white, and blue hues. Decorative touches like themed serving trays, candles, and playful games can also help create a memorable gathering that feels both timeless and personal. You can stretch that sentiment around your home. Holiday decor doesn't have to be limited to the dining table, Tally adds. Decorative pillows can instantly refresh living rooms, porches, or reading nooks, while framed art adds a festive touch to entryways, mantels, or gallery walls. Interactive pieces like patriotic tic-tac-toe sets add a colorful flourish to coffee tables or indoor entertaining spaces. They serve as both decor, and conversation starters, she said. Layering these accents throughout the home helps create a cohesive look that feels celebratory without overwhelming the space.
Well, our next story is headlined Ancient Woods, and it's about trees that are some of the oldest living objects on the earth. Unfortunately, it begins with the Robin Hood oak dies, but here are some other old trees who are still with us. I remember it like it was yesterday, that rainy summer day when I met the Major. After traveling to Newstead Abbey, the ancestral home of Lord Byron, I caught a bus to Sherwood Forest in Nottinghamshire, England. The morning sky, plastered with dark gray clouds, made the greenery of the forest so much brighter. After a few moments on the trail, I started to see them one after another. Kings of the forest with bulging dark brown trunks and curved branches growing in all directions, whispering to me through the leaves in the wind. And then I came to a large clearing where the major oak stood, no other tree around close to its height or width. For a moment I stood there thinking about everything the tree has witnessed, how the land and people around it transformed throughout its life. There was a German tour group admiring the scene, their guide explaining the arduous task of preserving this fragile tree, how hotter summers, just like the one we experienced at the time, made it that much harder. As I gazed at the major again, with many branches resting on supports, I saw the weight of the centuries upon it. Looking back on my visit with the major, I was gifted with a fleeting feeling. I was transported centuries back in time and found myself at one with the wilderness, but with no one around but the trees. 1,200 years passed in the shade of the major oak of Sherman Forest before it was declared dead after failing to come to leaf. The storied tree is treasured not only for its age, stature, and beauty, but for connections with the legend of Robin Hood, said to have hidden among his band of outlaws inside the trunk to escape the Sheriff of Nottingham. Today, the once sprawling forest reserve is confined to a 1,000-acre reserve. The tree was not appreciated only by human admirers. It provided food and shelters for countless generations of hundreds of insect, fungi, bird, and mammal species in an impressive display of concentrated biodiversity. Sadly, it was people, well-intentioned or not, who contributed to the tree's death. A combination of poor soil, human interventions, and a weakened root system were the factors in the decline of the major oak, according to the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. Climate change and associated recent heat waves and droughts compounded the challenges the tree faced, the Society wrote. Well, some of the other ancient trees still in existence today include General Sherman, and while it's not one of the oldest, it's one of the most well-known trees in the world. General Sherman is in Sequoia National Park and is about 2,200 years old. It's famed as the largest tree in the world by volume and weighs about 2.8 million pounds, as much as 15 adult blue whales. It's 275 feet tall, and its girth is 103 feet. The Alerce millenario, based on recent scientific research, Methuselah may have competition for being the oldest tree in the world. Alerce millenario, known as the Gran Abuelo, is a Patagonian cypress in Chile that could be anywhere from 2,400 to 5,500 years old. It's difficult to age because of its extremely wide trunk that could be rotted or decayed in the center, so scientists haven't been able to drill to the center to get an accurate tree ring account. It is 196 feet tall and 14 feet in girth. And the Methuselah tree, California, boasts both the largest and oldest trees in the world. Methuselah, a bristlecone pine, is crowned as the oldest living non-clonal tree in the world, with an estimated age of 4,850 years. It's been able to survive for so long because its slow growth in cold, dry, high-altitude conditions allowed it to create an incredibly dense wood that is nearly immune to rot, fungi, and pests. The height is only 32 feet, The girth is only 3 feet, but again, it's estimated to be 4,850 years old.
Wow, those trees are among my dog's best friends. You know, and this is a very historic weekend, major celebrations all over the place, and we're going to return now to the opinion page and to the My View column as an author and Buffalonian, Stuart Desmond, writes a little bit about Buffalo's history. And the headline is, Ellicott's Niagara Square should stay. I see that Buffalo is once again planning to tinker with Niagara Square, the centerpiece of Joseph Ellicott's 1803 street plan for Buffalo. As I recount in my new book about post-war Buffalo called After the Gold Rush, during the mayoral campaign of 1961, Mayor Frank Sedita released an attractive new plan for downtown Buffalo, with pedestrian malls on the broad diagonal avenues leading to and into Niagara Square. Voters were unimpressed. In the coming decades, city administrators took an opposite approach from Sedita's plan by blocking 2 of the grand avenues of Ellicott's plan. Most people, then and now, know nothing about Joseph Ellicott, the first resident agent of the Holland Land Company. He grew up on a farm and hardly attended school. Ellicott apprenticed with his older brother Andrew as a surveyor. In 1792, the pair surveyed the future site of Washington, D.C., and its elegant Enlightenment-era plan by Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, an architect born and trained in Paris. L'Enfant's plan made a big impression on Ellicott, and when he was called on 10 years later to design a town of Buffalo Creek in 1803, there were only a few dirt tracks, what are now Main Street, Broadway, and Niagara Street. But Ellicott could envision a town where 20 or 30 years hence, with open spaces and broad diagonal avenues emerging from the hub of Niagara Square to penetrate a grid of streets. In 1805, when New York State laid out the nearby village of Black Rock, surveyor Lemuel Foster produced an unadventurous grid, much like a Roman army camp. We know the plan today from Buffalo streets west of Richmond Avenue. Those running north-south had numerical names, some of which still survive today. The east-west streets were named for the U.S. states, as they still are today. Ellicott's open spaces, now called Lafayette Square and Niagara Square, for more than 200 years have functioned as a gathering ground for people of Buffalo to express their opinions at presidential speeches and communist demonstrations, at war bond rallies and peace demonstrations, at public hangings, military parades, and veterans memorials. Throughout Buffalo's first 160 years, architects met the challenge of building on Ellicott's oddly shaped downtown lots, where diagonal avenues pierced the regular grid. Those architects and their clients realized that this complication was a small price to pay for the broad avenues that introduce light and perspective into the west side of Main Street. But city planners in 1968 permitted the closing off of Niagara Street and West Eagle Street to accomplish Main Place Mall and Tower. Instead of a view from Main Street to Niagara Square, we had a curtailed, dim Niagara Street, later gloomed further by the erection of the Rath Building. You can still see in the surviving Court Street a clear view from Main Street to Niagara Square, not yet interfered with by the city planners. Through contemporary activists, Most of us now know about the park plan of Frederick Law Olmsted, who lived 60 years after Ellicott, and how that was desecrated in the 20th century. It's time now that Joseph Ellicott got the same respect as Olmsted. Whatever is planned for Niagara Square, let's not further desecrate Ellicott's extraordinary vision.
Well, you know, one of the things people don't know is that we're used to Niagara Square having the McKinley Monument there and driving around it. But up until the McKinley Monument was put there, Niagara Square was just a big intersection. There was no traffic lights. Of course, there were very few cars back then. The McKinley Monument was installed in 1906, 1907, but otherwise it used to be just a big intersection with the homes of wealthy people around it. So it was a residential area. For example, when Millard Fillmore returned to Buffalo after being president, his mansion was on the site where the Statler Hotel is today. In fact, it was torn down to build the Statler Hotel. So, you know, we're used to Niagara Square as being, you know, with the McKinley Monument in the center, but for many years, from its initiation up until the early 20th century, it was just a big intersection.
Oh, very good. Thank you for that information.
We'll wrap up here with some digest items, and we'll begin with Pope Leo praying for quake victims and rescuers. Pope Leo expressed solidarity Sunday with the people in Venezuela grappling with the devastating impact of twin earthquakes that struck the country earlier this week. I wish to express my closeness to the Venezuelan sisters and brothers affected by the recent earthquakes that caused numerous victims and injuries, the pontiff said in Spanish before worships gathered for Sunday's Angelus prayer in Rome. The pontiff also expressed gratitude to rescuers and all those assisting Venezuelans in the aftermath of the disaster. A helicopter belonging to Saudi oil giant Aramco crashed Sunday in Ras Tanura on Saudi Arabia's eastern coast on the Gulf west of the Strait of Hormuz, killing 14 nationals, the state news agency reported, adding that the cause was unknown. Aramco resumed crude oil loadings on Friday at its Ras Tanura terminal in the Gulf after they were halted for nearly 4 months. The relevant authorities have launched a full investigation to determine the cause of the crash, a state news agency added. Aramco did not respond immediately to an emailed request for comment. The incident took place at 6 a.m. local time, the state agency said, without providing further details. In Colorado, 3 firefighters were killed and 2 injured while responding to the Snyder wildfire burning along the Utah-Colorado border, the U.S. Wildland Fire Service said on Sunday. Colorado Governor Jared Polis declared a disaster emergency response to the fire on Saturday, authorizing the Colorado National Guard to support response efforts. And scientists say that our current heat wave, as I say, we'll kind of end with the weather. We started with the weather, is the worst ever. Temperatures hit 104 degrees Sunday in parts of Europe as storms move into other areas, with France reporting 1,000 excess deaths during the record-breaking heat wave. The French Public Health Agency said that most heat-related fatalities involved older people and warned that the number was expected to rise as more details became available about the deaths in residential care and private homes. Scientists said the heat wave, which began June 20th, was the worst recorded in Europe, and the blistering conditions disrupted power generation, damaged infrastructure, and overwhelmed healthcare systems.
Yes, and I've read that the historic French vineyards are catastrophically not surviving very well with the heat. The grapes are actually turning to raisins with high sugar content, so it's not good.
Well, I'm not a wine drinker, but I do eat raisins in my cereal every morning.
They'll be very tasty. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for June 29th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajak. We thank you for listening and wish you a wonderful historic America 250 week.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the New York Times Magazine, and at noon we have today's USA Today. Stay with us. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability